Night falls over a forgotten landscape, and the sound of distant bells echoes like ghosts through the centuries. The camera glides slowly across a ruined fortress, stone walls blackened by time, banners long gone, only shadows clinging to the towers. This is where our story begins, in the silence left behind by one of the most powerful, most feared, and most mysterious brotherhoods in human history, the Knights Templar. The year is 1314. The air is heavy with smoke and the bitter scent of burning flesh. In the heart of Paris, a man stands chained to a wooden stake. His name is Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Order. The flames rise around him, and yet he does not scream. Eyewitnesses claim that his final words were a curse, that he summoned both Pope Clement V and King Philip IV to meet him before God's throne within a year. And, eerily enough, both men were dead within 12 months. Coincidence? Or the fulfillment of a dying man's vow? This moment is where legend and history collide. The death of de Molay was not just the death of a man. It was the attempted erasure of a brotherhood, the silencing of an oath, and the burial of a secret that had terrified kings and popes alike. But the ashes of the Templars refused to stay buried. Whispers of what they had sworn to protect continued to echo through the centuries. Some say those whispers are still heard today, in the halls of secret societies, in the carvings of ancient chapels, and in the dreams of those who cannot stop searching. This documentary is not merely a retelling of the Crusades or the financial empire the Templars built. It is a descent into the labyrinth of time, an attempt to piece together a puzzle that has haunted scholars, mystics, and conspiracy theorists for more than 700 years. The Knights Templar were warriors, yes, but they were also monks, bankers, explorers, and perhaps something more, custodians of a secret so dangerous it could topple empires if ever revealed. What held them together? What made them choose to die rather than reveal what they knew? What oath could be so binding that men would endure torture, fire, and public execution in complete silence? That question is the beating heart of our journey tonight. For hidden beneath the dust of medieval Europe lies a story of loyalty and blood, of faith and forbidden knowledge, and of a ritual so secretive that even today, its details are whispered only in the darkest corners of history. To understand the Templars, we must first strip away the romantic legends that grew up around them. Forget the Hollywood image of knights in shining armor riding endlessly toward noble quests. The reality is stranger and far more complex. The Templars were born in an age of holy war. Their very existence was forged in blood, a brotherhood of fighting monks sworn to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. And yet, from the very beginning, they were more than mere crusaders. They lived by a rule stricter than that of any monastery, answering only to the Pope himself, and they operated outside the authority of kings. But independence breeds suspicion, and as the Templars grew richer, more powerful, and more secretive, whispers began to spread. Whispers of hidden rites performed in the dead of night. Whispers of idols, of heresy, of strange rituals that bound the knights together in a way no outsider could understand. It is here, in these whispers, that we first catch a glimpse of the blood oath. Imagine the scene. A young nobleman kneels in a dark chamber lit only by flickering candles. Around him stand men in white mantles marked with a red cross. He is stripped of wealth, of family name, of all worldly ties. Before him lies a sword, a chalice, perhaps even a human skull, relics of mortality and devotion. A vow is spoken, not just to the order but to God himself. And then, according to some accounts, blood is drawn from the initiate, from the brotherhood, sealing a covenant that no mortal hand could break. Whether literal or symbolic, the effect was the same. The new knight was no longer his own man. He was part of something larger, something that demanded everything, even his life, in service of the order's mission. This was no casual promise. It was a vow unto death. This opening chapter immerses us in that atmosphere of awe and terror, to make us feel the weight of the choice each knight made. because what followed was a life of battle and secrecy. The Templars carved fortresses across Europe and the Holy Land. They escorted kings, they guarded relics, and they became the first international bankers, holding the fortunes of nobles and monarchs alike. All of it was made possible because of a vow, a blood oath that held the order together with unshakable loyalty. And so, when King Philip of France moved against them in 1307, accusing them of blasphemy and devil worship, the Templars refused to break their silence. Even under torture, many would not betray the mysteries they were sworn to keep. That choice cost them their lives, but preserved their secret, whatever it may have been. And that is why we are still talking about them 7 centuries later. This first section of our journey sets the stage for everything that follows. It is a call into darkness, an invitation to look beyond the surface of history. The blood oath of the Knights Templar is not merely an artifact of the past. It is a thread woven through the fabric of Western civilization. To pull at that thread is to risk unraveling the stories we've been told about God, power, and the nature of truth itself. So prepare yourself, for as we follow this trail of shadows, we will confront not just the history of a secret order, but the hidden fears and desires that lie at the heart of humanity. We will ask what it means to swear an oath so binding that death is preferable to dishonor. And we will discover why, even now, there are those who say the oath has never been broken, that somewhere, in some forgotten place, the Brotherhood still exists, watching and waiting. This is the beginning. The fire has been lit. The shadows are stirring. The truth, or something like it, is about to be revealed. Our journey now takes us back to the dawn of the 12th century, when Europe was still reeling from the shockwaves of the First Crusade. Jerusalem had fallen to Christian forces in 1099, and pilgrims, noble and poor alike, flooded the Holy Land in search of redemption. But the roads were perilous. Bandits, Saracen raiders, and lawless mercenaries turned pilgrimages into deadly ventures. And so, around the year 1119, a small group of knights took an extraordinary vow to protect the faithful traveling to Jerusalem, even if it cost them their lives. These 9 knights were led by Hugues de Payens, a man whose life was shrouded in equal parts chivalry and mystery. They were not many, but their purpose was fierce. They swore poverty, chastity, and obedience, living as warrior monks under a new and radical ideal, to fuse the sword and the cross into a single mission. This tiny band soon became known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, or simply, the Knights Templar. At first, their presence was humble. They lodged in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, believed by Crusaders to be built on the site of King Solomon's Temple. This was no coincidence. Their very name connected them with one of the most sacred and enigmatic structures in biblical history. For 9 years, the Templars defended pilgrims and trained in relative obscurity. But whispers began to spread in Jerusalem that these knights were not merely guarding roads, but digging beneath the Temple Mount itself. Why were they excavating? What did they find? Medieval chroniclers are silent, but later rumors tell of strange discoveries, sacred relics, ancient scrolls, perhaps even the Ark of the Covenant itself. Some say they uncovered knowledge preserved from the time of Solomon, wisdom so powerful it would grant its holder dominion over kings and empires. If true, this would explain why, after nearly a decade of obscurity, the Templars suddenly gained unprecedented recognition. In 1129, the order was formally endorsed by the Church at the Council of Troyes. With the blessing of Bernard of Clairvaux, the most influential abbot of the age, the Templars went from obscure knights to the Pope's favored warriors. Bernard himself wrote their rule, praising them as the embodiment of Christian knighthood. But it was more than mere papal favor that elevated them. The Templars had tapped into something deeper, something that commanded the respect of Europe's most powerful men. This is where mainstream history and the esoteric narrative begin to diverge. Historians see this as the Church simply institutionalizing a successful fighting force. But the alternative history view suggests that the Church recognized perhaps even feared, what the Templars had discovered beneath the Temple Mount. Their elevation was not just political, it was a pact, a deal struck in shadow. From that point onward, the Templars were no longer merely knights. They were a sovereign order, answering only to the Pope himself. They paid no taxes, owed no allegiance to any king, and could cross borders freely. This independence allowed them to grow into a power unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Their Red Cross banner became a symbol of divine wrath on the battlefield. Their discipline was legendary. They charged in silence, like ghosts, breaking enemy lines with terrifying precision. But alongside their battlefield reputation, another side of the order began to grow. The Templars became keepers of treasures and knowledge. Pilgrims entrusted their wealth to them for safekeeping, and soon kings were borrowing from them as well. They established a network of preceptories, fortified monasteries scattered across Europe, that serve as safe havens, treasuries, and perhaps as libraries of hidden lore. Imagine the scene. Within these strongholds, far from prying eyes, secrets could be stored, relics from Jerusalem, forbidden texts, and perhaps even artifacts connected to the Holy Grail legends that were beginning to circulate in Europe at the time. Could it be that the Templars saw themselves not merely as warriors, but as guardians of a great cosmic truth? This idea is strengthened by the symbols associated with the order. Their seal famously depicts two knights riding a single horse, often interpreted as a symbol of poverty, but some researchers suggest it represents duality, body and spirit, exoteric and esoteric, outer order and inner circle. Could there have been two Templar orders, the public face known to the world, and a secret inner order guarding a deeper, more dangerous mission? It is here that the notion of the blood oath gains even greater significance. If the Templars had indeed uncovered a secret beneath Solomon's temple, something that could challenge the Church's authority, then mere vows of loyalty would not have been enough. They would have needed an oath sealed in blood, a vow that carried eternal consequences for betrayal. This oath would bind not just individuals, but generations, creating a chain of secrecy stretching across centuries. Thus, the birth of the order was not simply the founding of a knightly brotherhood. It was the opening act in a drama that would play out across the entire medieval world. A drama that would see the Templars rise to unimaginable power and ultimately provoke the wrath of kings and popes who feared what they had become. This section leaves us with a haunting question: what really happened during those 9 years of silence on the Temple Mount? What did those first 9 knights see, touch, or read that transformed them from humble warriors into the most powerful and enigmatic order of the Middle Ages? The stage is now set. The Templars are no longer a ragtag group of pilgrims protectors. They are a sovereign force with secret knowledge, vast resources, and an oath stronger than death. The next step is to peer inside the veil and witness the ritual that made a man. A Templar, the initiation that would forever bind him to the order and to the blood oath we are seeking to understand. Close your eyes and imagine the chill of a medieval night, the smell of burning tallow candles, the sound of soft footsteps echoing across stone floors. A lone man, head bowed, is led into a shadowed hall. He is a candidate, a postulant who has spent months proving his devotion, testing his courage, surrendering his will. Tonight, he will become a Knight Templar, if he survives the ordeal. Unlike the grand public ceremonies of kings and nobles, the Templar initiation was shrouded in secrecy. Contemporary chronicles suggest that only brothers of the order and a handful of witnesses were present. The candidate knelt before the master of the order, stripped of sword and spurs, dressed only in a simple tunic. He was asked 3 times if he came of his own free will, and 3 times if he would swear obedience, poverty, and chastity until death. Each question was designed to remind him that there was no turning back. But this was only the beginning. After the formal questions, the candidate was warned of the hardships ahead: a life of war, hunger, obedience, and the possibility of a brutal death. Some accounts suggest that at this moment, the candidate was given a final chance to leave, To step back meant shame, but freedom. To step forward meant surrender of everything: land, wealth, family ties, and even his name. When he accepted, the ritual deepened. He was led into a chamber lit by flickering lamps, where relics of the order were displayed: a cross, a chalice, and perhaps a skull said to remind him of his own mortality. Here, the master or senior knight may have whispered the words of the inner vow, the one that went beyond public promises. Some medieval trial records describe shocking rites: the kissing of certain body parts, the denial of Christ, even spitting upon the cross. Modern scholars believe these were exaggerations, confessions extracted under torture. Yet the persistence of these accusations suggests there was something about the Templar initiation that outsiders found disturbing, even dangerous. The most provocative theory is that the Templars performed a symbolic death and rebirth ritual. The candidate might lie prostrate as though dead, then rise as a new man, reborn into the order. Some accounts claim a small incision was made on the candidate's arm, allowing blood to flow, a literal sealing of the vow. The blood may have been touched to the cross or mixed with wine and consumed, binding the knight to his brothers by more than mere words. Such imagery would not have been out of place in medieval thought. Blood was sacred, the very substance of life. To mingle it in a shared cup was to create a bond deeper than kinship. This could explain why the Templars' loyalty was legendary, why betrayal was so rare. They were not merely comrades in arms. They were blood brothers, united by a covenant they believed holy. Once the vow was spoken and sealed, the new knight received his mantle, the white cloak with its red cross, a symbol of martyrdom. The moment he put it on, he was considered dead to the world. His former life ceased to exist. From that moment forward, he lived only for the order and its mission. The ceremony ended with a solemn mass, and the brothers embraced him as one of their own. From that night on, he would eat at their table, fight in their ranks, and sleep under their rule. The initiation was complete, but the transformation had only begun. For the newly made Templar, every day was a reminder of his vow. The rule of the order dictated everything: how he prayed, what he ate, how he spoke, even how he dressed. There was no privacy, no personal wealth, no marriage or children. The order became his entire world. This total surrender was the very heart of the blood oath. But the deeper meaning of the ritual may have been hidden even from many members. Some historians argue that only a select inner circle knew the true significance of the vows. The outer order, the rank-and-file knights, lived by discipline and obedience, while the inner order may have pursued a hidden mission: the preservation of secret knowledge, relics, or perhaps even the so-called treasure of the temple. This dual-layered structure is not unique in history. Mystery schools of the ancient world often kept two levels of teaching: the outer for the many and the inner for the few. The Templar initiation, with its strange whispers and guarded secrecy, seems to follow the same pattern. And so, the making of a Templar was more than a religious ritual. It was a psychological forging. It stripped a man of all earthly attachments and remade him into a weapon, a guardian, and perhaps an initiate into mysteries that reach back to Solomon's temple itself. If we are to believe the testimonies, both damning and reverent, this ritual was not merely symbolic. It carried a supernatural weight. To break the vow was to invite eternal damnation. Perhaps that is why, when the order was finally crushed, so many chose death over confession. This section of our journey forces us to confront the most personal moment of a Templar's life, the moment he ceased to be himself and became part of the great, secret machine that was the order. And it leaves us with the burning question: what was whispered into his ear in that dark chamber? What was the secret so terrible, so glorious, that he would rather burn alive than speak it? In the next section, we will examine the evidence left behind by history, the trial records, the testimonies of tortured knights, and the confessions that hinted at something far stranger than mere vows of poverty. Here, we will dig deeper into the most controversial claims of all: that the Templars worshipped a hidden idol, drank from skulls, and performed rites that bound them in blood. The year is 1307. Dawn breaks over France, and riders thunder through villages with sealed orders from King Philip IV. By nightfall, the hammer falls. Hundreds of Templars are dragged from their beds, shackled, and thrown into dungeons. The king's accusations are staggering: heresy, idolatry, sorcery, and blasphemy. The order that once stood untouchable under papal protection is now branded as a cult of devil worshippers. But behind the accusations lies the question that has haunted historians ever since. Were these charges fabrications, or did they conceal a truth too dangerous to reveal? The trial of the Templars produced thousands of pages of testimony, much of it extracted under torture. The records, preserved in Vatican archives for centuries, contain chilling allegations. Some knights confessed to spitting upon the cross during initiation, denying Christ, or worshipping a mysterious idol known as Baphomet. Others spoke of secret kisses, strange greetings, and drinking from a human skull. To the medieval mind, these were not merely sins. They were blasphemies of the highest order, proof of diabolical corruption. Yet, if we strip away the lurid details, a pattern begins to emerge. Many testimonies describe a hidden rite that was part of the initiation, a ritual that was known only to the initiated and never witnessed by outsiders. This was the so-called blood oath, the core of the Templars' secrecy. Imagine the scene within the dungeon. A knight, broken by days of pain, finally whispers the truth, or what his interrogators want to hear. He describes a chamber lit by a single lamp. He speaks of being ordered to renounce worldly ties, to submit completely to the order. Then comes the most curious part, the ritual gesture. Some say the initiate kissed a fellow knight on the base of the spine, others that he kissed the master on the mouth as a sign of spiritual union. While shocking to medieval ears, scholars suggest these acts may have symbolized humility, obedience, and fraternity rather than literal heresy. But the testimonies do not stop there. Several knights claimed that a chalice or vessel was brought forth, sometimes said to contain wine, sometimes described as blood. One witness swore that it was the blood of a brother who had died, preserved as a holy relic. Another said it was the blood of Christ himself, a fragment of the Holy Grail mystery passed secretly among them. If true, this transforms the blood oath from a mere vow into a sacrament, a ritual of communion that united the Templars not just as soldiers, but as mystics. Of course, the Inquisitors had every reason to magnify these claims. By painting the Templars as occultists, King Philip justified seizing their lands and wealth. Yet, some details are too consistent to ignore. Across dozens of prisons, from Paris to Poitiers, men who could not communicate with each other gave similar descriptions. Either they were repeating what they thought the Inquisitors wished to hear, or they were telling fragments of a genuine secret. Modern historians have wrestled with these contradictions. Some argue that the accusations of idol worship refer to a head or bust the Templars kept, perhaps a relic of John the Baptist or a saint. To the Church, such relics were holy, but if the Templars used them in private ceremonies, it could have been twisted into evidence of paganism. Others see the name Baphomet as a corruption of Muhammad, a medieval slur meaning Muslim prophet, suggesting the Templars have been accused of sympathizing with Islam. But there's another possibility, that Baphomet was a code word, a cipher concealing a deeper secret, perhaps the gnosis or hidden knowledge that the Templars guarded. The Vatican's decision to keep these documents locked away for centuries adds fuel to the mystery. When they were finally published in 2007 in the Chinon parchment, they revealed that Pope Clement V had quietly absolved the Templars of heresy in 1314, even as de Molay was burned at the stake. In other words, the Church knew the order was not guilty of devil worship. So why allow the suppression to proceed? Perhaps because what the Templars truly guarded could not be allowed to resurface. Consider this. If the blood oath really did involve secret rites, they may have been remnants of early Christian or Gnostic traditions. teachings that emphasize direct contact with the divine without the mediation of priests. Such ideas were dangerous to the medieval church, which built its power on being the sole gatekeeper of salvation. The Templars, through their secret rituals, might have been preserving a different, older version of Christianity, one where man and God stood face to face. This interpretation casts the entire trial in a new light. The blood oath was not a pact with the devil, but a solemn vow to protect a truth that could upend the religious order of Europe. The church may have feared that if the oath were broken and the secret revealed, its authority would collapse. Thus, the Templars had to be silenced, not because they were guilty, but because they were inconvenient. As we sift through these testimonies, we feel the tension mount. Each confession is a window into the psychology of men trapped between faith and fear, loyalty and survival. Some recanted and were executed as relapsed heretics. Others confessed and were pardoned, living out their lives in monasteries. But through it all, the central secret was never fully exposed. The Templars took their oath to the grave. This section leaves us with an image of the blood oath as both a shield and a curse. It was the bond that made the order unbreakable, but also sealed their fate. For in refusing to betray it, they became martyrs to a cause we still struggle to understand. In the next stage of our journey, we will explore the most tantalizing theory of all, that the blood oath was tied not merely to secret rites, but to a sacred bloodline, a hidden lineage that, if revealed, would have rewritten the history of Christendom itself. If the Templars' blood oath was more than a simple vow, then perhaps it was a pledge to guard not just relics or scrolls, but something living, something that pulsed with divine blood. This is where history blends into legend, where the story of a Knights Templar collides with the mythos of the Holy Grail. The Grail legend, as we know it, emerged in the late 12th century, around the very time the Templars were rising to power. Poets like Crétin de Troyes and Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote of a mysterious chalice that could heal the sick, grant eternal life, and connect man directly to God. The Church framed it as a sacred object, perhaps the cup used at the Last Supper or the vessel that caught Christ's blood at the crucifixion. But others began to see the Grail as a symbol, not of an object, but of a lineage. This interpretation was radical. The Grail was not merely a cup, but the sangreal, the royal blood, the holy bloodline. According to this theory, Jesus and Mary Magdalene were not just teacher and disciple, but husband and wife, parents of a hidden family whose descendants carried a living spark of divinity. Protecting this bloodline would have been a task so dangerous, so politically explosive, that only the most disciplined and secretive order could accomplish it. Enter the Knights Templar. Their presence in the Holy Land, their alleged excavations beneath the Temple Mount, and their sudden rise to power all seem, to some researchers, too coincidental. What if the Templars found evidence of this bloodline, genealogies, relics, perhaps even bones, and took upon themselves the sacred duty of protecting it? The blood oath would then be more than symbolic. It would be the literal safeguarding of divine blood. This idea electrifies both historians and storytellers because it reframes the Templars not as mere soldiers, but as custodians of humanity's greatest secret. The Church, whose authority rested on the uniqueness of Christ as the Son of God, could never allow such a truth to spread. If Christ had descendants, if the divine spark continued in human veins, then salvation could no longer be monopolized by a hierarchy of priests. Power would shift, and the entire medieval world would be turned upside down. The Grail legends often speak of a Grail king, a wounded monarch whose land suffers until the Grail is restored. Could this be a metaphor for a hidden bloodline, one that must be preserved or renewed to heal the world? The Templars, bound by their blood oath, may have been the guardians of this royal secret, ensuring the line remained unbroken even as kingdoms rose and fell. Some point to the symbolism of the Red Cross on the Templar mantle. Blood and sacrifice were central to their identity. To wear the cross was to accept martyrdom, to live as one already dead for Christ, but but perhaps also to pledge one's life to preserving something more tangible, a family, a heritage. Theories about the Templars and the bloodline intensified in the 20th century with books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which argued that the order was connected to the Priory of Chaon, a secret society allegedly dedicated to protecting the descendants of Christ. While many scholars dismiss the Priory as a modern hoax, the idea remains compelling. Could there have been an older, more authentic network, a hidden chain of guardians that survived the fall of the order? Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland is often cited as a clue. Built in the 15th century by the Sinclair family, who were rumored to be connected to surviving Templars, the chapel is filled with strange carvings. Angels holding grail-like cups, green men peering from the stonework, scenes that seem to hint at hidden knowledge. Some researchers claim the chapel was designed as a reliquary for something of immense importance, perhaps the Grail, perhaps documents proving the bloodline theory. But the blood oath was more than a charge to protect. It was also a warning. Breaking the oath meant spiritual death. This is why, when the arrests came, the Templars chose silence. Better to burn than to betray what they were guarding. If the secret was a living bloodline, betrayal would have meant exposing innocent descendants to persecution or death. This theory also explains the fury of King Philip IV. He did not simply want to erase a rival order. He wanted their knowledge, their treasure, their secret. His interrogators asked again and again about the initiation rite, the idol, the strange worship, but perhaps what he truly sought was a name, a location, a bloodline to exploit. The silence of the Templars must have infuriated him, for their secret died with them. Modern genetic studies have fueled new speculation. Researchers tracing the DNA of certain noble families have found unexpected links, suggesting survival of ancient Near Eastern bloodlines in Europe. Could these be the echo of what the Templars swore to protect? We cannot know for certain, but the possibility is tantalizing. What makes the bloodline theory so compelling is its resonance. Deep down, humanity is fascinated by the idea that the divine could be flesh and blood, that holiness could run in human veins. It democratizes the sacred. It says that God is not distant, but alive in the world, moving through generations. The Templars, whether by design or destiny, became the guardians of this idea. Their blood oath was a vow to preserve it at all costs, even if it meant erasure from history. And perhaps that was the ultimate victory, for though the order was destroyed, the legend lived on, growing stronger with each retelling, ensuring that the secret, whatever it was, would never truly be forgotten. This section leaves us with a powerful image, not just of knights guarding a treasure chest, but of warriors standing watch over a cradle, a family, a lineage that might hold the key to humanity's redemption. If this was their charge, then their silence was not failure, but triumph. In the next chapter, we will turn from bloodlines to knowledge, to the Templars' alleged role as keepers of forbidden wisdom. Could it be that their oath was also a pact to safeguard teachings of alchemy, sacred geometry, and spiritual truths the Church could not tolerate? We will open the door to the hidden library of the Middle Ages and see what light it casts on the blood oath's deeper meaning. The Knights Templar were more than warriors and bankers. They were seekers. Behind the clashing swords and fortified castles lay a deeper mission, one that whispers through history like a hidden current. The Templars, some say, were custodians not only of relics and treasure, but of ideas. Knowledge so dangerous that it had to be hidden from the Church, guarded by oaths of secrecy and sealed in blood. Alchemy, the royal art, was one of the most prized pursuits of the medieval world. Far from being just the attempt to turn lead into gold, alchemy was a spiritual science, a map of the soul's transformation. It sought to purify matter and spirit, to achieve the philosopher's stone, the state of perfection in which the mortal becomes divine. Some researchers argue that the Templars, during their time in the East, encountered Islamic scholars, Jewish mystics, and Eastern alchemists, absorbing teachings that would later flow into Europe's intellectual underground. Imagine a Templar preceptory on a winter night. In one chamber, Knights sharpen their swords and prepare for battle. In another, deep below ground, a group gathers by lamplight over strange manuscripts brought from Jerusalem. They speak in hushed voices, tracing symbols of circles, triangles, and stars. These were not idle doodles. They were diagrams of creation, maps of the cosmos, attempts to understand the mind of God. Gnostic ideas may have played an even greater role. Gnosticism taught that salvation came not through blind faith, but through direct, experiential knowledge, gnosis, of the divine. This was heresy to the medieval church, which claimed to be the sole mediator between God and man. If the Templars embraced even fragments of these teachings, they would have been holding a spiritual revolution in their hands. The blood oath, in this light, becomes something far more profound. It was not just a pledge of loyalty, it was an initiation into a way of seeing the world. It meant death to the old self and rebirth into one who knew the great secret. What was that secret? Perhaps that the divine spark lived in every man and woman, that heaven was not a distant place, but a state of being accessible here and now. Their exposure to ancient knowledge is not mere speculation. The Templars were stationed for decades in the very lands where early Christianity was born, where Jewish mysticism thrived, where Islamic scholars preserved and expanded upon the works of the Greeks. They had access to libraries, texts, and teachers unknown to the rest of Europe. They were uniquely positioned to act as bridges between civilizations, bringing back not only wealth but wisdom. Some believe that the Gothic cathedrals of Europe, with their intricate geometry, soaring vaults, and stained glass windows, are physical embodiments of this secret knowledge. Though built by cathedral builders and not by the knights themselves, the sudden flowering of Gothic architecture coincided with the Templars' rise. Was it coincidence, or did the order play a hidden role, funding and guiding the projects as expressions of the divine harmony they had discovered? The symbolism of these cathedrals is unmistakable. Light as metaphor for divine truth, labyrinths carved into stone floors as pathways of initiation, geometric proportions based on sacred ratios. These are the fingerprints of a worldview that sought to unite science, art, and spirit. A worldview that might have been nurtured within the Templar order. But knowledge is dangerous. The Church of the Middle Ages was wary of unapproved teachings, quick to brand them heresy. The Templars' independence, wealth, and secretive nature made them perfect targets for suspicion. Their blood oath may have been a shield, a way to ensure that their teachings would survive even if the order was destroyed. To break the oath was to risk not only personal damnation, but the loss of wisdom meant to guide future generations. The idea of a hidden library or secret archive recurs again and again in Templar lore. Some stories claim that when the arrests began in 1307, wagons laden with documents and treasures slipped away under cover of night, disappearing into safe havens. Others speak of sealed vaults beneath Rosslyn Chapel or hidden beneath former Templar commanderies in France and Portugal. If such archives exist, they may contain not gold, but knowledge, alchemical treatises, Gnostic gospels, maps of lost sites, perhaps even scrolls from the Temple of Solomon itself. There is also the tantalizing theory that the Templars encoded their secrets in symbols scattered across Europe. The pentagrams, double crosses, and mysterious effigies carved into churches may not be mere decoration, but a form of code, visible only to those who knew the key. The blood oath would ensure that this knowledge remained protected, its meaning revealed only to the worthy. Seen through this lens, the Templars were not merely soldiers of the cross, but initiates of a mystery tradition stretching back to Egypt, Babylon, and beyond. Their order may have been the medieval continuation of an ancient chain, one that sought to preserve the perennial philosophy, the wisdom that all religions share at their core. Of course, such theories are difficult to prove. The written evidence is fragmentary, the symbols ambiguous, the testimonies tainted by torture. But sometimes the absence of proof is itself a clue. If the Templars did safeguard forbidden knowledge, then the greatest evidence is that so little survived, a testament to how fiercely they protected it. This section shows us the Templars not merely as martyrs, but as torchbearers. Their blood oath becomes a promise to carry the light of knowledge through the dark ages of ignorance. Whether they succeeded is another question, but their legacy suggests that something was indeed passed on. For centuries later, secret societies like the Freemasons claimed descent from the Templars and continued to explore the same themes: geometry, alchemy, spiritual enlightenment. Our investigation now stands on the threshold of a turning point. We have seen the Templars as guardians of pilgrims, guardians of blood, and guardians of wisdom. In the next section, we must turn to their transformation into something even more powerful: the financiers of kings, the bankers of Europe, and explore how their blood oath safeguarded not just secrets and souls, but fortunes vast enough to alter the course of nations. When we picture the Knights Templar, we imagine knights charging across dusty battlefields, lances lowered, banners streaming in the wind. But there was another side to the order, one that was far quieter and far more revolutionary. Over the course of a century, the Templars transformed from a small military brotherhood into the first true international banking system of Europe. And it was their blood oath that kept this empire running, ensuring loyalty, secrecy, and efficiency on a scale the medieval world had never seen. The Templars' financial role began modestly. Pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land often carried gold or silver, making them easy targets for thieves. The Templars offered a solution. Pilgrims could deposit their wealth at a Templar preceptory in Europe and receive a written note, a kind of medieval check, which they could redeem upon arrival in Jerusalem. This innovation allowed safe travel without fear of robbery and laid the groundwork for a system of credit and exchange that spanned Christendom. As their network of preceptories expanded, the Templars became trusted by kings and nobles. Their fortresses doubled as treasuries where monarchs stored their crowns, regalia, and state funds. Soon, the order was not merely protecting pilgrims, but financing wars, building castles, and underwriting entire campaigns in the Holy Land. The Templars became the money movers of the medieval world, discreet, efficient, and utterly loyal. Their blood oath was crucial to this success. Every Templar was sworn to poverty and could not personally profit from the order's wealth. This meant that the fortunes passing through their hands were less vulnerable to embezzlement and theft. The oath of secrecy ensured that the details of transactions, the locations of vaults, and the routes of treasure convoys remained hidden from prying eyes. In a time when most kingdoms relied on informal trust networks, the Templars offered something almost unheard of: institutional reliability. The scale of their operations grew astonishing. In Paris, the Templars built a massive commandery that functioned as a de facto central bank. Here, they kept not only their own wealth, but that of the French crown. In London, their new temple served as a hub of finance, issuing loans and holding deposits for England's monarchs. The order developed sophisticated accounting practices, using ciphers and double-entry systems to track funds, techniques that would later shape modern finance. But their rise to economic power was a double-edged sword. The same kings who relied on Templar credit began to resent their independence. The order paid no taxes, answered only to the Pope, and possessed resources that rivaled royal treasuries. Their neutrality allowed them to move money across borders, which made them indispensable, but also threatening. Some historians argue that the blood oath was as much about protecting financial secrets as spiritual ones. If a knight betrayed the order, revealing the locations of treasure or the movement of funds, entire kingdoms could collapse. This was not hypothetical. There are records of treasure convoys being ambushed and stolen by bandits or hostile lords. The punishment for betrayal was severe, sometimes death, reinforcing the seriousness of the oath. Imagine the scene of a Templar treasury: heavy chests stacked in torchlit vaults, clerks bent over parchment ledgers, guards armed to the teeth standing watch. Each coin, each ingot, each gem was a symbol of trust placed in the order by Europe's elite. To lose it would mean disgrace. To misuse it would mean damnation. The blood oath turned this trust into a sacred duty, one that bound the knights spiritually as well as practically. The Templars' economic power also allowed them to pursue projects beyond the reach of most monarchs. They built not just fortresses, but mills, farms, and ports. They invested in ships, creating a fleet that moved men and goods across the Mediterranean. Some have suggested that this fleet was the key to the mysterious lost Templar treasure, said to have vanished from La Rochelle on the eve of the arrests. Whether the treasure was gold, relics, or secret documents, its disappearance has fueled speculation ever since. The financial genius of the Templars ultimately contributed to their downfall. King Philip IV of France was deeply indebted to the order. His wars had drained the royal treasury, and the easiest way to erase that debt was to destroy his creditors. The accusations of heresy provided the perfect excuse. When the order was crushed, much of its wealth was seized by the crown, but rumors persisted that the true treasure had already been spirited away. This section shows us the Templars at the height of their worldly power. They were no longer just warriors of the cross, but bankers, diplomats, and administrators of an empire of trust. Their blood oath had created a network of men willing to die rather than betray their duty. And this made them formidable, perhaps too formidable for the kings and popes who ultimately turned against them. As we move forward, the story darkens. The Templars' power, wealth, and secrecy became their undoing. In the next section, we will witness the turning tide, the envy of kings, the fear of the church, and the political storm that would lead to the order's destruction. For nearly 2 centuries, the Knights Templar had been the hammer of Christendom, feared on the battlefield and trusted in the counting house. But by the dawn of the 14th century, the tides had begun to turn. The Crusader states in the Holy Land had fallen, one by one, until only the fortress of Acre remained, and when it fell in 1291, the Templars were driven from the east. Their mission, at least in the eyes of many, was over. No longer were they needed to protect pilgrims or hold the line against Islam. But their power, wealth, and independence had not diminished. This made them dangerous. Kings across Europe now saw the order as a state within a state, answerable to no monarch, richer than most crowns, and loyal only to the Pope. And no king feared them more than Philip IV of France. Philip was known as Philip the Fair, not for his justice, but for his appearance, tall, handsome, and cold as marble. His wars with England and Flanders had left France drowning in debt. Much of that debt was owed to the Templars, who had financed his campaigns and safeguarded his treasury. To Philip, the order was both creditor and rival, a power that could not be controlled. The Pope at the time, Clement V, was a weak and hesitant man, recently installed in Avignon and politically beholden to Philip. The king saw an opportunity. If he could destroy the order, not only would he erase his debts, but he would also seize their vast wealth, lands, castles, gold, and perhaps their secret knowledge. The campaign began with whispers. Anonymous accusations were spread. The Templars were said to deny Christ, spit upon the cross, worship a demonic idol called Baphomet, engage in obscene rituals. These rumors struck at the heart of medieval faith. Heresy was not merely a crime. It was a contagion, a threat to the soul of Christendom itself. Philip's agents fanned the flames, feeding stories to clerics and barons until the air was thick with suspicion. But rumor alone was not enough. Philip needed the Pope's approval to act, for the Templars were under papal protection. At first, Clement resisted, wary of attacking an order so closely tied to the Church. But Philip pressed harder, reminding the Pope that the Templars had grown too proud, too rich, and too independent. Finally, Clement relented, though reluctantly, agreeing to allow an investigation. Philip, however, had no intention of waiting for a slow, careful inquiry. Instead, he prepared a trap. On the night of October 12, 1307, sealed orders were dispatched across France. They contained a single command: at dawn, arrest every Templar knight, sergeant, and priest. The timing was deliberate, a coordinated strike that would catch the order completely off guard. And so, on the morning of Friday, October 13th, the hammer fell. Templars awoke to the sound of fists pounding on their doors, swords drawn, torches blazing. They were seized, chained, and dragged from their preceptories. Across France, hundreds were taken in a single day, a scale of operation that stunned even the Pope. It was one of the first great mass arrests in European history, a purge that would forever link Friday the 13th with ill fortune. Imagine the scene in Paris. The mighty temple fortress surrounded by soldiers, its gates smashed open, its treasures inventoried under royal seal. Knights who had once ridden fearlessly into battle now stood shackled in the chill dawn, accused of crimes so monstrous that even their enemies hesitated to believe them. Their blood oath, the very thing that had bound them together, now became their curse, for they refused to betray their brothers or their secrets, even under threat of death. Philip's propaganda machine went into overdrive. The accusations were read aloud in public squares. The Templars worshipped idols, engaged in sodomy, spat on the cross, and renounced Christ. The effect was electric. Common people, who had once revered the knights as holy warriors, now saw them as monsters. Fear turned to rage, and rage turned to condemnation. But not everyone believed the charges. Some chroniclers noted that the Templars had been faithful servants of Christ for nearly 200 years. Could it really be that they had suddenly become heretics overnight? Many suspected that Philip's true motive was greed. Even Pope Clement wavered, attempting to assert papal authority over the trial process. Yet Philip's was iron. He summoned Clement's representatives to France and forced them to sanction the arrests retroactively. The Pope, trapped between principle and politics, complied. This was the turning point. The Templars were no longer knights of Christendom, but prisoners of the crown. Their castles were seized, their treasuries emptied, their reputation blackened. And yet, despite the shock of the assault, something curious happened. There was no widespread rebellion, no dramatic attempt to free the imprisoned brothers. Some historians believe that the Templars had warning of the arrests, that their fleet at La Rochelle sailed away with treasure and documents before the king's men arrived. Others argue that the order had grown complacent, unable to imagine that Christendom could turn on them so suddenly. Either way, the trap had been sprung, and the stage was set for the trials that would follow, trials that would reveal, or claim to reveal, the inner workings of the order. Torture would pry open mouths. Real or false confessions would spill forth, and the secret of the blood oath would be dragged into the light, twisted to serve the king's narrative. This section marks the darkening of our story. The Templars, once untouchable, are now hunted. Their power is crumbling, their silence being tested by fire and iron. And as we move into the next chapter, we will descend into the dungeons of France to witness the interrogations that would extract the most damning and most mysterious testimonies in medieval history. The dungeon is cold. Damp air clings to the stone, and the only light comes from torches guttering in iron brackets. Chains rattle somewhere in the darkness. Here, in these shadowed chambers beneath France's castles, the fate of the Knights Templar is being decided, not by sword or lance, but by rack and flame. Philip's arrests had netted hundreds of brothers, from seasoned knights to humble sergeants. At first, they maintained silence, standing by their oath even in captivity. But Philip was determined to crush the order completely, and silence would not serve his cause. He needed confessions, confessions that would damn the Templars in the eyes of Christendom and justify his seizure of their wealth. And so, the inquisitors went to work. The methods were brutal. Men were stretched on the rack until their joints popped and their bones threatened to break. Others were suspended by their wrists for hours, their shoulders slowly tearing from their sockets. Fire was applied to the soles of feet. Water was forced down throats until victims felt they would drown. Some were left naked in freezing cells. Others starved until delirium set in. The pain was relentless, designed to break the will as much as the body. And yet, even under such torment, many Templars refused to betray the order. Chroniclers record that some died without speaking a word, choosing death rather than perjury. But others, desperate to end their suffering, confessed to whatever their inquisitors demanded. They admitted to spitting on the cross during initiation, to worshiping a mysterious idol, to engaging in obscene rituals. Some claimed they had been taught to deny Christ in order to test their faith, others that they had kissed their brothers in strange places as a sign of obedience. Were these confessions true? Modern scholars argue that many were the product of torture, unreliable at best, fabricated at worst. But the sheer consistency of some details is haunting. Across different prisons, knights who could not communicate with one another gave similar descriptions of rites performed in secret. If these were inventions, they were remarkably coordinated. The psychological impact of the trials was devastating. For centuries, the Templars had been paragons of piety. Now, they were branded as heretics, paraded before the public in disgrace. The blood oath that had once united them became a test of faith. Some brothers, broken by pain, begged forgiveness from the church, hoping to save their souls. Others recanted their confessions once the torture stopped, insisting that they had lied under duress. This cycle of confession and recantation frustrated the inquisitors, who responded with renewed cruelty. Those who retracted were declared relapsed heretics and condemned to death. Dozens were burned at the stake in Paris and elsewhere, their ashes scattered to the wind as a warning. The spectacle was meant to break the morale of the surviving brothers, and it worked. But even amidst this horror, there were moments of quiet defiance. Some Templars refused to confess, no matter the torment. They clung to their oath until the end, their silence becoming a final act of loyalty. To them, the blood oath was more than a promise. It was their very identity. To betray, it would have meant betraying their brothers, their mission, perhaps even God himself. Picture a knight kneeling in his cell, battered and bleeding, whispering a final prayer. He knows that dawn will bring the stake and the flame. Yet he refuses to speak the words that would condemn the order. In that moment, the blood oath transcends politics and becomes something holy, a covenant kept at the price of life itself. The trials dragged on for years, spreading beyond France into other kingdoms. In England, Spain, and Germany, the Templars were interrogated, though not always with the same brutality. In some places, they were acquitted, their honor restored. But Philip's influence over the papacy ensured that the order would not survive. In 1312, under pressure, Pope Clement V issued the papal bull Vox in Excelso, formally dissolving the Knights Templar. Their lands and assets were transferred to the Hospitallers, though much of the treasure had mysteriously vanished. The order was gone, its knights scattered, imprisoned, or executed. Yet the legend was just beginning. The secrecy surrounding their initiation rites, the confessions of strange ceremonies, and the mysterious disappearance of their wealth all combined to create an enduring aura of mystery. People whispered that the Templars had cursed their enemies, that they had hidden their treasure where no king could find it, that they had passed their secret knowledge to successors who would carry it through the centuries. The torture chambers may have silenced their voices, but they could not silence the questions. What was it that the Templars were protecting so fiercely? Why would so many go to their deaths rather than reveal it? The blood oath had done its work. The secret, whatever it was, remained hidden, locked behind the courage of men who refused to break. This section is the emotional crucible of our story, where the tension between faith, fear, and survival reaches its peak. It shows us the human cost of secrecy and the price paid for loyalty. And it leaves us with a haunting image, the smoke of burning pyres rising into the sky, carrying with it not just the lives of the Templars, but perhaps the last unspoken words of a mystery that still eludes us. As we move forward, we will turn to the final act of this drama, the execution of Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, whose death would seal the fate of the order and give rise to one of the most enduring curses in history. Paris, March 18th, 1314. The chill of early spring hangs over the Isle de la Cite as crowds gather along the banks of the Seine. The air is thick with anticipation and smoke from the pyres already prepared. This is the day that will mark the end of an era, the final chapter in the story of the Knights Templar. Two aged men are led from their prison cells, their faces pale but resolute. One is Geoffroy de Charny, preceptor of Normandy. The other is Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Order. For nearly 7 years, de Molay has endured imprisonment, humiliation, and interrogation. At first, under torture, he had confessed to the charges brought against him, but later he retracted, insisting that the order was innocent of heresy and that his earlier confession had been forced from him by pain. The papal commission had sentenced him to life imprisonment, but this morning, as he is brought to the scaffold, he is given one final chance: reaffirm his confession, accept penance, and live. De Molay refuses. Standing on the platform before the crowd, he raises his voice, declaring the order's innocence. Chroniclers record that his words rang out across the square. The Templars were not guilty of the crimes charged against them. He called upon God to judge those who had condemned them unjustly. For a moment, there is silence, the kind of silence that chills the blood. Then the order is given, and the two old knights are led to the stake. Imagine the scene: the sun dipping low, the river glinting like molten gold, the pyres crackling as they are lit. De Molay is bound to the post, his white Templar mantle, now tattered and scorched, still draped across his shoulders. The flames leap higher, licking at his feet, his legs, his chest. The pain must be unbearable, yet eyewitnesses claim that he did not scream. Instead, he used his final breath to speak a curse. He summoned Pope Clement V and King Philip IV to meet him before the throne of God within a year, to answer for their injustice. It was a dramatic moment, one that seared itself into the memory of all who witnessed it. And then, as the fire consumed him, the last Grand Master of the Templars became a martyr. What followed seemed to give weight to his words. Within a month, Pope Clement was dead. Some said of sickness, others whispered of fear. By the end of the year, Philip II was dead, fell by a sudden stroke while hunting. Their deaths, so soon after de Molay's execution, were seen by many as divine retribution. Chroniclers began to speak of the curse of the Templars, a curse that would haunt the Capetian dynasty for generations. Indeed, the line of Philip IV was plagued by misfortune. His 3 sons each became king but died without producing lasting heirs, leading to the dynastic crisis that sparked the 100 Years' War. To the people of France, it seemed as if the vengeance of the Templars had reached beyond the grave, reshaping the destiny of kingdoms. De Molay's death was more than the end of a man. It was the symbolic death of the entire order. With him perished the last hope of vindication, the last living memory of the Templar secret. Whatever the blood oath bound them to protect, he took it with him into the flames. Yet his death also ignited a legend. The image of the Grand Master standing fearless in the fire became a rallying cry for generations of esoteric seekers and secret societies. Some claim that his spirit watches over the descendants of the order, guiding them in secret. Others believe that his death marked the passing of the torch, that the Templar legacy survived through hidden lines: the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and other brotherhoods who kept the flame alive. This moment, more than any other, cemented the Templars' place in history. Had they died quietly in their cells, they might have been forgotten. But de Molay's defiance turned their fall into a mythic drama, ensuring that people would continue to ask the forbidden questions. What was the secret they died to protect? What oath was so sacred that even the threat of fire could not break it? As the smoke drifted over Paris, carrying the ashes of the last Grand Master into the evening sky, one era ended and another began. The Templars were gone, but their mystery was just beginning to grow. The blood oath had been sealed not only in initiation halls and secret chapels, but in the very flames that consumed its last keeper. In the next section, we will follow the trail of those who survived, the knights who escaped the king's net, the fleets that vanished from port, and the rumors that the order's treasure and knowledge found refuge in distant lands. For though the pyres burned hot that day, they could not destroy the shadow of the Templars, which still stretches across the centuries. The fires of Paris may have claimed Jacques de Molay, but they did not consume the entire order. Even as the arrests swept across France, rumors began to circulate that not all of the Templars had been captured. Some had fled, vanishing into the night before the king's men arrived. And with them, it was said, went the greatest secret of the order, their treasure, their archives, perhaps even the very heart of the blood oath itself. At the port city of La Rochelle, witnesses claimed to have seen a fleet of Templar ships slip out to sea under cover of darkness in October 1307. No one knows where they went. Some say they sailed for Portugal, where King Denis refused to persecute the order and allowed the knights to regroup under a new name, the Order of Christ. Others believe the ships made for Scotland, where Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated and would have welcomed skilled warriors to his cause. Legends claim that Templar knights fought alongside Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, helping secure Scottish independence. While hard evidence is scarce, the timing is tantalizing. Bannockburn was fought just months after de Molay's death, as though the Templars had risen from their own ashes to strike one last blow. In Portugal, the transformation of the order is better documented. The papal bulls dissolving the Templars were carefully interpreted by King Denis, who transferred their property and members into a new organization, the Order of Christ. This clever political maneuver preserved the order's wealth and manpower while satisfying Rome's decree. For centuries afterward, the Order of Christ would play a crucial role in Portuguese exploration, funding voyages that opened the age of discovery. Some researchers argue that this was no coincidence, that the Templar mission continued, now directed toward finding and mapping new lands, perhaps even seeking the original Jerusalem or the fabled Grail kingdoms in distant places. The idea of a surviving Templar network is one of the most enduring parts of their legend. In France, clandestine gatherings were rumored to occur for decades after the arrests. In Germany and Spain, knights are said to have melted into other military orders, carrying with them secret knowledge. In England, where the persecution was less severe, some Templars simply retired, living out their days quietly. But did they truly abandon their vows, or did they continue to meet in secret, honoring the blood oath away from public eyes? Artifacts connected to the order seem to support the idea of survival. Strange carvings appear in chapels built after 1312, depicting Templar crosses, knights on horseback, and scenes from the Passion of Christ with unusual, esoteric symbolism. Some of these appear in places where no official Templar presence existed, suggesting that surviving brothers or their sympathizers were leaving clues, marking safe havens, or preserving memory for the future. Then there is the question of the treasure. When Philip's men stormed the Paris temple, they found surprisingly little gold. Chroniclers noted that the great vaults were nearly empty. Where had the riches gone? Some say the Templars have been warned and spirited their wealth away in the weeks before the arrests. The missing treasure has inspired countless theories that lies buried beneath Rosslyn Chapel, that was hidden on a remote island off Scotland's coast, or that it crossed the Atlantic centuries before Columbus, hidden in the New World. These escape legends feed into the idea that the Templars became the seed of later secret societies. Freemasonry, which rose to prominence in the 17th and 18th centuries, adopted much Templar imagery: the cross and crown, the sword, the ritual initiation. Some Masonic rites explicitly claim descent from the Templars, suggesting that the blood oath lived on, passed down through generations under new guises. But whether literal or symbolic, the idea of survival is powerful. It tells us that the Templars' mission was never truly extinguished. Their oath bound them not just to each other, but to a destiny, one that could not be broken by papal decrees or royal fire. If their secret was a bloodline, they may have spent generations protecting its heirs. If it was knowledge, they may have hidden it until a time when the world was ready to receive it. Imagine the image: a lone Templar riding under the moon, carrying a chest filled with scrolls or relics, bound for a distant sanctuary. He knows that his brothers are dying in France, that the order is burning, but he also knows that the mission must endure. Every hoofbeat is a prayer. Every mile, a vow renewed. These are the moments that turn history into legend. For even if we cannot prove that the Templars escaped, we cannot prove that they did not. The silence that followed their fall is not the silence of extinction. It is the silence of something that has gone to ground, waiting. This section leaves us with the sense that the blood oath was not broken on the pyres of Paris, but carried forward into a new age. The Templars may have lost their castles, their banners, their public face, but they did not lose their identity. Somewhere, the Brotherhood lived on, hidden yet vigilant, guarding the secret that had cost them everything. In the next section, we will look for their fingerprints in stone and symbol, in cathedrals, chapels, and manuscripts that may preserve the echoes of their vow. If the Templars could no longer speak openly, perhaps they carved their truth into the very fabric of the world, leaving a trail for those who would dare to follow. When an order is silenced, its words vanish, but its symbols often endure. Across Europe, the shadow of the Knights Templar still lingers, carved into walls, hidden in mosaics, etched into manuscripts. If the Templars could no longer speak their secrets aloud, perhaps they left them in stone, for future generations to find. This section is a pilgrimage through the monuments they built and inspired, in search of the code they may have left behind. Our journey begins in Paris, at the site of the Great Temple enclosure. Though little remains above ground, archaeologists have unearthed fragments of columns and foundations. Some bear geometric patterns, circles within squares, stars and crosses, designs that appear again and again in Templar sites across Europe. These are not random decorations, but symbols of harmony, of the meeting point between heaven and earth. They remind us that the Templars were not just warriors, but builders, patrons of architecture whose fortresses were as carefully planned as their campaigns. Travel south, and we find the commandery of La Couvertoirade, its round church still standing like a sentinel. The round nave is striking, echoing the form of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Round churches were a Templar signature, linking Europe to the Holy Land and perhaps to something deeper, the circle as symbol of eternity, perfection, and the divine. To enter such a church was to step into a cosmic diagram, a place where the initiate could feel himself part of a greater order. But the most enigmatic of all Templar-related sites is Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, built in the 15th century by the Sinclair family, who were rumored to shelter fugitive Templars. Rosslyn is a riot of symbolism. Angels hold chalices, vines coil in intricate knots, and strange carvings depict scenes that seem almost Mesoamerican, leading some to speculate about pre-Columbian voyages. Hidden among the carvings are patterns that match musical notation, as though the stone itself were meant to be played like an instrument. At the heart of Rosslyn stands the apprentice pillar, an intricately carved column whose design echoes Norse myths, Christian imagery, and possibly even Hebrew mysticism. Some have claimed that beneath this chapel lies a crypt containing the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the lost Templar archives. While such claims remain unproven, the chapel's atmosphere is undeniable. It feels less like a parish church and more like an initiatory temple. Gothic cathedrals, too, bear traces of what might be called the Templar signature. Consider Chartres, with its labyrinth carved into the floor, a path of meditation, perhaps a symbolic pilgrimage, or Notre Dame of Paris, with its strange array of gargoyles and alchemical symbols hidden among the sacred scenes. Though these cathedrals were not built solely by the Templars, many were constructed during the height of the order's influence and financed by the same networks of patrons. Their architecture embodies a worldview in which mathematics, spirituality, and art are fused into a single act of worship. The use of sacred geometry is one of the most compelling clues. Ratios like the golden mean, star polygons, and perfect triangles are encoded into the very floor plans of these structures. To the initiated, these were not mere aesthetic choices, but blueprints of divine order. A reminder that creation itself was governed by number and harmony. The blood oath, in this context, becomes an oath to preserve this cosmic knowledge, to ensure that the map of heaven was inscribed on earth for those with eyes to see. Outside of stone, Templar symbolism also appears in manuscripts and seals. Their official seal, two knights riding a single horse, has been interpreted as a sign of their vow of poverty, but may also carry esoteric meaning. The union of opposites, the dual nature of man, the merging of the temporal and the spiritual. Another recurring motif is the eight-pointed cross, symbolizing regeneration and resurrection, a clue perhaps to the ritual of death and rebirth they enacted during initiation. Even in remote rural chapels, strange carvings hint at hidden teachings. Green men, faces surrounded by leaves, peer from capitals, symbols of rebirth and the eternal cycle of life. Serpents twist through borders, a reminder of wisdom and temptation. These images, tolerated by the church but never fully explained, may have served as mnemonic devices for those who had undergone the Templar mysteries. It is tempting to read too much into these clues, to turn every carving into a cipher. Yet the sheer consistency of the imagery across time and geography suggests more than coincidence. The Templars and their allies seem to have been engaged in a grand project, to leave a legacy that could not be erased, even if their order was destroyed. Imagine a stonemason carving a symbol late at night, long after the overseers have gone. His chisel bites into the stone, leaving behind a sign that only his brothers will understand. He knows that centuries may pass before anyone deciphers it, but still he works, driven by the oath that binds him. These symbols became a silent language, a way of transmitting memory across generations. Long after the Templars were gone, the symbols remained, waiting for the day when seekers would rediscover them and piece together the story. And perhaps that day is now, for scholars, historians, and mystics are once again tracing the red thread that runs through these monuments, attempting to reconstruct the knowledge the Templars died to protect. This section reminds us that history is not only written in books, but carved in stone, woven into glass, hidden in the very structures that surround us. The Templars may have been burned, but their voice still whispers from cathedral walls, chapel pillars, and weathered ruins. As we move into the next section, we turn from stone to parchment, from symbol to text. For in the modern era, new discoveries, declassified Vatican documents, newly studied manuscripts, are beginning to shed light on what really happened during those dark years. Perhaps, at last, we are approaching the heart of the mystery. For centuries, the true story of the Templars lay locked away, hidden in dusty archives and forgotten libraries. Their trials were recorded, their confessions catalogued, and then, like the order itself, buried by decree. The official narrative became one of heresy and punishment, a cautionary tale told by kings and clerics. But time has a way of eroding walls, even the ones built around forbidden truths. In the past century, scholars and researchers have begun to unearth the documents that tell the Templars' side of the story. The most stunning revelation came in 2001, when Vatican scholar Barbara Frail uncovered a forgotten parchment in the archives. Known as the Chinon parchment, this document contained the absolution of the Knights Templar by Pope Clement V himself. Far from condemning the order as heretics, Clement had privately declared that their actions did not constitute heresy and that they were to be reconciled with the Church after penance. This absolution had been hidden for nearly 700 years, suggesting that the suppression of the Templars was driven less by theology and more by politics. The Chinon parchment was officially published in 2007, causing a sensation. It overturned centuries of belief about the Templars' guilt and painted Philip IV as the primary villain of the story. To many, it was a vindication, proof that the knights had been victims of a power grab rather than practitioners of dark rites. Yet the parchment also left tantalizing gaps. While it absolved the order of heresy, it did not explain what, exactly, the secret rites consisted of, or why the Pope felt compelled to keep the absolution hidden. Beyond the Vatican, other discoveries have fueled the mystery. Scholars examining trial records have found inconsistencies in the testimonies, suggesting that some may have been fabricated wholesale. Others have discovered letters hinting that Templar treasure convoys were intercepted, not by the king, but by loyalists who spirited them away. Some of these letters reference the secret of the temple as still intact, as though the most precious possession of the order had not fallen into royal hands. In recent years, technology has opened new doors. Ground-penetrating radar has been used to scan sites like the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, revealing hidden chambers that may date back to the Crusader period. Though excavation is politically sensitive, these findings suggest that the Templars' excavations may have been far more extensive than previously believed. If they did recover scrolls or artifacts, those may have been smuggled back to Europe and hidden in preceptory vaults or carried away on the fabled fleet. Modern researchers have also turned to the symbols left behind in cathedrals and chapels, treating them as codes to be deciphered. Some claim to have found star maps encoded in the floor plans of Gothic churches, pointing to specific constellations significant to ancient mystery traditions. Others argue that the Templar cross itself encodes astronomical knowledge, acting as a compass that aligns with solstices and equinoxes. These discoveries suggest that the order's knowledge was not merely spiritual, but scientific, an attempt to preserve a cosmic worldview suppressed by the orthodoxy of the age. Even DNA science has entered the debate. Geneticists have examined remains from suspected Templar burial sites, looking for evidence of Near Eastern ancestry, which might support the idea that the order intermarried with local families or guarded a bloodline. While results remain inconclusive, the very attempt shows how alive the quest for the Templar secret still is. What is most striking is the tone of many modern historians. Where once the Templars were painted as heretics or romanticized as chivalric martyrs, today they are increasingly seen as complex, guardians of something too powerful to be left in the hands of kings. The narrative has shifted from one of guilt to one of enigma. And yet, for every document released, a dozen questions remain unanswered. Why did Clement V feel it necessary to hide the absolution for centuries? Did he fear the order's reinstatement, or was he pressured by Philip to remain silent? What was contained in the Templar archives that vanished? Were the confessions completely false, or were they distortions of genuine esoteric practices? This section shows us that the story is not frozen in the past, but still unfolding. Every year, new documents are cataloged, new manuscripts translated, new evidence brought to light. Far from closing the case, these discoveries make the mystery deeper. They suggest that the blood oath was not a fiction invented by torturers, but a very real vow, one so dangerous that even the highest authority in Christendom hesitated to expose it. Imagine scholars working late into the night in the Vatican's secret archive, unrolling parchments that have not seen light in centuries. The smell of ancient ink fills the air. Fingers trace the faded Latin words that speak of absolution, of secrecy, of commands given in whispers. It feels almost as though the Templars themselves are present, guiding the search, reminding the world that their story is not yet finished. This section leaves us standing at the edge of revelation. We have the documents, the testimonies, the symbols, but do we have the courage to piece them together? In the next section, we will attempt to do just that, to look beyond the history books and into the realm of esoteric interpretation, where the blood oath becomes more than ritual and is revealed as a spiritual contract that still challenges us today. When we strip away the politics, the trials, and the propaganda, what remains is the oath itself, the heart of the Templar mystery. What if the blood oath was never meant to be understood merely as a legal contract or a threat of punishment? What if it was a spiritual covenant, a rite of transformation designed to remake the initiate at the deepest level? Across history, mystery schools have used initiation as a way of guiding the seeker through death and rebirth. In ancient Egypt, priests led initiates through the underworld journey of Osiris. In Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries reenacted the descent of Persephone and her return to the living world. These rituals were not theater, but a form of spiritual alchemy, intended to awaken the soul. The Templar initiation may have been the Christian continuation of this lineage, a way of dying to the profane world and being reborn into the sacred brotherhood. The blood oath, then, was not just about secrecy. It was about transformation. When a candidate pledged his life to the order, he symbolically laid himself on the altar. The shedding of blood, whether literal or imagined, marked the cutting of old ties, family, wealth, ambition, and the birth of a new identity. This is why the oath was so unbreakable. It was not merely a promise, but a recreation of the self. To betray, it would be to betray one's very soul. Some esoteric writers suggest that the oath also bound the initiate to a cosmic purpose. The Templars were not simply fighting for earthly Jerusalem, but for a heavenly one, the city of God that exists within. Their battles, their prayers, their secret rites were all part of a quest to bring that divine order into the world. Seen in this light, the blood oath becomes a pact to serve the divine plan, whatever the cost. This interpretation sheds new light on the alleged denial of Christ during initiation. Rather than blasphemy, it may have been a ritual test, a symbolic stripping away of external belief, forcing the initiate to confront faith on a deeper, more personal level. To truly find Christ, the candidate had to lose him first, descending into darkness before emerging into the light. The use of a skull in the ceremony, as some testimonies claimed, fits this pattern. The skull was not a token of devil worship, but a memento mori, a reminder of mortality. By facing death symbolically, the knight was prepared to face it literally on the battlefield or the pyre. The blood oath thus became a ritual rehearsal for martyrdom, forging men who could endure any trial without fear. Seen from this perspective, the Templar silence under torture becomes more than obstinacy. It becomes the final step of initiation. Their refusal to betray their brothers was the ultimate proof that the ritual had worked, that they had truly been remade. They were no longer merely men, but living symbols of the vow they had taken. This spiritual contract may also explain the enduring fascination with the Templars. People are drawn to them not just because of their treasure or their mystery, but because they represent an ideal, the idea that one can dedicate one's entire being to a higher cause, that life can be lived with absolute purpose. Modern esoteric traditions often claim to preserve fragments of this wisdom. Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other initiatory orders use symbols and rituals that echo Templar imagery. The compass and square, the cross, the resurrection motifs. Whether or not there is a direct historical line of descent, the spiritual lineage is clear. The Templar blood oath has become a model for the idea of total commitment to truth. This interpretation also helps us understand why the Church feared the Templars. A man who has undergone death and rebirth is no longer bound by fear of authority. He answers to a higher law. Such men cannot easily be controlled, taxed, or manipulated. In a feudal world built on obedience, the Templars represented a dangerous freedom, and freedom is always threatening to power. Picture a lone knight kneeling in a Camelot chapel. Before him lies a cross and a sword. He has given everything away: lands, title, inheritance. He feels the cut on his arm where his blood has been drawn, mingled with wine, placed upon his lips. In that moment, he is no longer merely himself. He is a vessel for something greater, a keeper of a secret that is both terrifying and luminous. This is the blood oath as spiritual contract, a covenant that will follow him beyond death. This section reframes the oath not as a dark conspiracy, but as a path of initiation. It was not about worshiping idols or plotting treason, but about forging a new kind of human being, one who lived in service to a mystery that transcended church and crown. As we move forward, we will attempt to piece together what that mystery might have been. In the next section, we will gather all the threads: the bloodline theory, the alchemical knowledge, the symbols, the testimonies, and see if we can uncover the true meaning of the Templar blood oath. This will be the climax of our journey, the moment where all the evidence comes together and we dare to speak aloud what the Templars themselves died to protect. We have followed the trail through battlefields, dungeons, and secret chapels. We have heard the testimonies of tortured knights, traced symbols carved in stone, and read parchments long hidden from human eyes. Now, at last, we arrive at the heart of the mystery, the moment to ask the question plainly: what did the blood oath of the Knights Templar really mean? The first layer is the most obvious: loyalty. The oath bound the Templars together into a brotherhood that no king or pope could easily break. This explains their legendary discipline in battle, their willingness to face death without fear. But the oath was more than a soldier's vow. It demanded total surrender of wealth, of will, of personal identity. It was a vow that turned individuals into living instruments of a greater mission. The second layer is symbolic. The blood shed during initiation, whether literally drawn or merely invoked, marked the initiate's death to the profane world. It was a ritual of transformation, a baptism not of water, but of blood. The new knight was no longer just a man, but a vessel for the order's spirit, bound to carry its secret through life and into death. The third layer is protective. The oath served as a security system, ensuring that the Templars' knowledge, treasures, and possibly even their sacred charge would remain safe even under threat of torture. This explains why so many went to the stake rather than speak. They were not merely keeping secrets for pride or stubbornness. They were guarding something they believed was worth dying for. And what was that something? Here lies the most tantalizing layer of all. Perhaps it was a bloodline, the living descendants of a holy family whose existence could shatter the political and spiritual foundations of Europe. Perhaps it was a library of scrolls, preserving teachings that would empower individuals to find God without the mediation of priests. Perhaps it was a relic so sacred, so powerful, that possession of it could change the course of history. The truth may be that it was all of these. The blood oath may have been a multifaceted covenant, to protect a lineage, to preserve a body of knowledge, and to keep safe the physical relics that embodied humanity's link to the divine. Seen this way, the Templars become not merely knights or bankers, but guardians of humanity's spiritual inheritance. This interpretation is supported by the breadth of the order's activities. They were soldiers, yes, but also architects, scholars, and financiers. Their mission seems to have been as much about building and preserving as it was about fighting. The blood oath unified these roles into a single destiny. Even their downfall takes on new meaning. When Philip IV moved against them, he was not merely seizing wealth. He was attempting to seize control of the narrative, to erase a version of Christianity that existed outside royal and papal authority. The Templar silence ensured that this narrative could not be twisted or used as a weapon. Their deaths became the final seal on the covenant, sanctifying it with fire. Imagine de Molay standing in the flames, his face lit by the firelight. In that moment, he is not just cursing his enemies, he is affirming the oath. He is saying, in effect, the secret dies with me, but it also lives beyond me. You may destroy the order, but you will never possess what we were sworn to guard. This is why the Templar story continues to haunt us, because somewhere deep down, we sense that they succeeded. Whatever they were protecting remains hidden, perhaps scattered in secret vaults, perhaps encrypted in symbols, perhaps living on in families or traditions we do not recognize. The blood oath did its work, and there is a final, more personal layer. The Templar blood oath challenges us. It asks, what is so sacred to you that you would die rather than betray it? What truth would you guard even if the world called you heretic, traitor, fool? The power of the story is not only in what the Templars kept secret, but in the mirror it holds up to us. Perhaps this is the ultimate meaning of the oath, to awaken in each of us the realization that there are truths worth suffering for, causes worth absolute commitment. The Templars may have guarded relics and scrolls, but what they truly guarded was the flame of devotion, a light meant to inspire future generations. Seen in this way, the blood oath becomes not just a medieval curiosity, but a living challenge. It calls us to rise above fear, to dedicate ourselves to something greater than personal gain. And it reminds us that even when institutions fall and empires crumble, a single vow, kept faithfully, can echo across centuries. This is the climax of our journey. We have pulled back the veil, and what we see is not simply conspiracy or treasure, but transformation. The blood oath was both shield and sword, curse and blessing, death and life. It was the heartbeat of the order, and its echo can still be felt wherever people gather in search of hidden wisdom, wherever seekers swear themselves to the path of truth. As we step out of this chamber of revelation, the story is not over. The Templars are gone, but their legacy remains. In the next section, we will look at how the blood oath continues to shape the modern world, in secret societies, in popular imagination, and in the restless hunger of those who still seek the Grail, whatever form it may take. The pyres of Paris have long since turned to ash, yet the shadow of the Knights Templar stretches into our own age. The order may have been officially dissolved in 1312, but its legacy never truly vanished. Instead, it seems to have gone underground, surfacing again and again in curious places, in the symbols of Freemasonry, in the rituals of secret societies, in the myths that still capture the public imagination. The blood oath, in some form, continues to echo across the centuries. The first and most famous inheritors of the Templar mystique are the Freemasons. Rising to prominence in the 17th and 18th centuries, the Masons adopted Templar imagery with enthusiasm. Their lodges were decorated with swords, crosses, and symbols of Solomon's Temple. Some Masonic rites explicitly claim that they are the spiritual heirs of the Templars, guardians of the same ancient wisdom. Whether this is historical fact or romantic invention, it shows that the idea of a secret brotherhood bound by sacred vows remain potent. Other groups, from the Rosicrucians to the Illuminati, have likewise drawn inspiration from the Templar legend. Their rituals often include stages of initiation that mirror the death and rebirth pattern of the Templar oath. Candidates are symbolically stripped of worldly attachments, made to pass through trials, and then welcomed into a circle of knowledge. These echoes suggest that the spiritual contract forged by the Templars has been kept alive, reshaped for new generations. The modern fascination with the Templars goes beyond secret societies. Popular culture has turned them into icons of mystery. Novels, films, and documentaries portray them as keepers of lost treasures, guardians of the Grail, conspirators pulling the strings of history. While these portrayals often take liberties, they tap into something real, the sense that the Templars were more than a medieval order, that they were part of a drama that is still unfolding. Even outside fiction, the order continues to inspire. Some chivalric organizations today claim direct lineage from the Templars and induct members in ceremonies that include vows of loyalty reminiscent of the medieval oath. Others focus on charity and service, seeking to embody the Templar ideals of discipline and devotion in a modern context. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of the blood oath is not institutional at all. It is personal. The idea that one can dedicate oneself wholly to a cause, that one can live with such singular purpose, resonates in a world often marked by fragmentation and distraction. People look to the Templars as an example of integrity, of courage, of living for something greater than oneself. In this sense, the blood oath has transcended the order that first swore it. It has become a symbol of absolute commitment, a call to those who feel that the world is in need of guardians once again. Whether the secret they kept was a bloodline, a relic, or a teaching, its deeper message is clear. Some truths are worth protecting, even at the cost of everything. Imagine a modern seeker standing in the ruins of a Templar preceptory. The walls are crumbling, the sky above vast and silent. Yet in that moment, he feels connected, not just to history, but to the spirit of those who once took the oath. The stones seem to whisper, "Do you have the courage to carry the flame?" This section reminds us that the Templar story is not only about the past, but about the present. The oath continues to inspire, to challenge, to provoke. It asks each generation to decide what is sacred, what is worth defending, what cannot be betrayed. As we approach the final chapter of this journey, we will reflect on what this means for us today. For perhaps the real secret of the Knights Templar is not hidden in some distant vault, but waiting to be discovered within ourselves. The torches are extinguished. The dungeons are empty. The pyres have burned down to cold embers. Our journey through the story of the Knights Templar has taken us across centuries, through the battlefields of the Crusades, the secret halls of initiation, the torture chambers of Philip's prisons, and the cathedrals where their symbols still whisper. We have followed the thread of the blood oath, trying to glimpse what it truly meant. And now, as we stand at the end of this path, we are left with more than a history lesson. We are left with a challenge. The Templars may be gone, but their mystery endures because it touches something universal. Deep within every human being is the desire for purpose, for meaning that transcends the ordinary. The Templar blood oath speaks directly to that hunger. It was, at its core, a promise to live and die for something beyond the self, to hold fast to truth even when the world turns against you. Perhaps that is why their story refuses to fade. For 700 years, kings and popes have tried to erase their memory, to reduce them to a footnote in medieval history. Yet the Red Cross still ignites the imagination. People still make pilgrimages to Templar sites, still write books and spin theories, still wonder what treasure might lie hidden in the vaults of Rosslyn Chapel or beneath the Temple Mount. The blood oath has become a mythic call, summoning generation after generation to seek. But the real treasure may not be gold, relics, or scrolls. The real treasure may be the courage the Templars embodied, the courage to take a stand, to endure suffering, to remain faithful to a vow even in the face of death. Their silence under torture was not just secrecy, it was testimony. It said to the world, there are things worth dying for. This is what gives the Templar story its haunting power. It forces us to ask ourselves uncomfortable questions. What do we believe in so deeply that we would risk everything to protect it? What lines will we not cross, even under threat of fire? What oaths, spoken or unspoken, guide our lives? Perhaps that is why the Templars have been claimed by so many movements over the centuries. Each era finds in them a reflection of its own struggles. To revolutionaries, they are symbols of resistance. To mystics, they are keepers of hidden wisdom. To seekers of justice, they are martyrs for truth. And to those who feel lost in a chaotic world, they are a reminder that it is possible to dedicate one's life to a higher cause. Imagine standing in the ruins of a Templar chapel at twilight. The wind moves softly through broken arches, carrying the faint sound of distant bells. You run your hand along the weathered stone and feel a connection that words cannot explain. For a moment, time collapses. You are not merely a tourist, but a witness to something eternal. The oath they swore still lingers in the air, inviting you to add your own voice. The closing reflection is not meant to provide easy answers. The truth about the blood oath may never be fully known, and perhaps that is as it should be. Some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries, not to frustrate us, but to keep us searching. The search itself transforms us, just as the Templar initiation transformed those who took the vow. This is the final gift of the Knights Templar, the reminder that history is not just what happened, but what still happens within us. Their oath calls across centuries, urging us to rise above fear and complacency, to live as though our lives have meaning and consequence. Whether we see the Grail as a cup, a bloodline, or a symbol of divine truth, the quest is the same: to seek, to guard, to serve. And so, as the credits roll on this long journey, we are left with a choice. We can close the book and walk away, satisfied with the mystery as entertainment, or we can take the next step. We can become seekers ourselves, asking the hard questions, daring to look beyond the surface of things. The Templars were not perfect men. They were flawed, ambitious, sometimes ruthless, but they were also men of vision, courage, and faith. Their blood oath was not merely about secrecy. It was about transformation, theirs and perhaps ours. As we leave the story behind, perhaps we carry a little of their vow with us. Perhaps, in some quiet corner of the soul, we hear the whisper, guard the truth, protect the light, seek the grail. And maybe, just maybe, that is the greatest secret of all, that the oath was never meant to die with them. It was meant to live on in those who dare to ask the forbidden questions, who are willing to risk everything for the answers. The fire is gone, but the embers are still glowing. The path lies before you. The call has been made. The question is no longer, what was the Templar blood oath? The question is, what will yours be?